Mario Party, one of the most influential games in the Mario series. It's the game that started a whole new genre of Mario games with a completely unique gameplay style that continues to thrive to this day. Not only that, but Mario Party also taught thousands of people a very valuable lesson: friendships don't last forever. Aside from the actual Mario Partying, there's also the minigames. Minigames are usually one of the most common talking points among Mario Party fans, and there have been several people all over the world talking about their favorite minigames. But there's also another thing about these minigames that someone might draw a conclusion to. These minigames can be freaking brutal. Like, sometimes it's worth asking what the heck got Mario and friends into these bizarre situations. If I were Luigi, I probably wouldn't want to get chased by a piranha plane in the middle of the jungle while on a skateboard, but he does it anyway. It's kind of become a meme at this point for Mario and his pals to be put in some of the most dangerous situations, all for a fun party game, and to the average player, getting dunked in lava is a lot less painful than losing a star, but I'd probably think otherwise. Okay, so maybe getting your star stolen is more painful, but regardless, I was thinking about how dangerous some of these minigames would be in real life, and that got me thinking of this idea. What minigames are you going to be most likely to survive in, and what minigames are going to result in your untimely doom? Well, I'm here to answer that question in this completely original video idea that no one has ever done before at all. Oh. I'll screw it, I'm doing it anyway. I'll link those videos in the description if you want to watch those too, because these guys probably have different opinions than me. Without further ado though, let's rank all 50 minigames in Mario Party 1 by how survivable they are. Also make sure to like and subscribe, because that's what all the big YouTubers are telling everyone to do these days. Alright, let's quickly set some ground rules here before diving into these deadly minigames. I'm going to be putting all of these minigames into one big tier list, and the lower they are in the list, the more deadly those minigames are. The tier list looks something like this. I also need to clear up what I consider a deadly minigame. To be honest, I don't really have that much of a concise opinion on what qualifies as a minigame being safe or not, so I'll most likely be going by these rules. My top priority for ranking these minigames is going to be how safe it would be if you were put into the minigame. Would you be able to easily win the minigame without being in any harm? Spoiler alert, you sure as hell aren't going to survive Handcar Havoc. The secondary priority is going to be how the actual characters fare in the game. Is everyone alive by the end of the minigame? Then it should get a slightly better score. This rule doesn't really apply as much, if at all, because it's unrealistic for everyone to 100% be able to survive a literal death trap, but it'll factor into the ranking if it makes sense. Also, let's make this clear before this comes up. By talking about how easy it is to survive in the minigames, it's under the assumption that you're actually participating in the minigame. For example, in Treasure Divers, you could stay at the water surface and be free from all the danger in the minigame, and while that would be safe, it's not as interesting, so it won't be counted. Finally, I want to point out that this is not a serious analytic deconstruction of the safety of the Mario universe, because let's be real, it's a Mario game. This is a series where a man in red overalls says wahoo a lot, eats mushrooms, stomps on turtles, and smashes bricks with his fist. Realism is kind of thrown out the window here. I'm just doing this ranking for fun, and therefore this ranking shouldn't be taken seriously. I'm not taking this seriously, and neither should you. With all of my ramble out of the way, let's actually start ranking some minigames, darn it! Also, I don't really know how to capture footage yet, so link to the people who actually did manage to do so in the description. Let's start off the 4-player minigame selection with Balloon Burst. And this one's kind of weird. The goal of this minigame is to pop your Bowser balloon first before the other players, and knowing Bowser, you'd expect him to fill his balloons with poison or something. But the worst thing that happens to the other players once you pop your balloons is that they get dizzy, which isn't really that bad. There's probably nothing inside of the balloons outside of helium, and the other players probably just get stunned from the noise of the balloon, which is really, really big, and it clearly makes a very loud noise when popped. What's weird is that for some reason, this noise doesn't bother the winning player at all, despite them being the closest to the balloon. Yeah, this is a weird minigame when it comes to survivability. I feel like the worst thing that could happen is the other player is going deaf because of the loud noise. But hey, everyone's still alive by the end of the minigame, so that's still a good start. All in all, while the noise is a big detriment to this minigame, there's nothing else that looks truly harmful. And with that, it gets to go on the couple of scratches tier. Next minigame on the list is Bombs Away, and it's sure one heck of a contrast from the last minigame. Sure, the first minigame took place in a dungeon, and this one has some scenery that looks a lot more pleasant, but all that pleasantness gets taken away from you when you remember the Bowser ship in the background. First of all, the actual island itself. This island is so slippery and unstable that it's a miracle if you're even going to be able to stay on it at all. And if you fall in the water, you can either drown, which isn't a good start, or there's these bloopers that carry you off somewhere. Has anyone ever questioned the intent of these bloopers before? Like, where do they take you once they get a hold of you? Do they bring you back to land, or do they just drown you outright? If the bloopers do the former, then this might be fine, but if it's the latter, I don't think I need to spell it out for you. Of course, getting dragged to your doom might be better than the alternative solution, which is getting shot at by a cannonball. This ship will not stop shooting cannonballs at you, and cannonballs aren't exactly made out of the softest of materials. Now top that off with the fact that it's being hurled at you from a cannon at a tremendous amount of speed, and that's probably going to leave a mark. Or if I want to put it more bluntly, yeah, you're going to die if this hits you. All of this sounds, well, awful, but that's only from the perspective of not being from Mario's world. In the actual game, all 4 players could theoretically survive until the very end, which is at least a better track record for some minigames, and even if they do get hit by a cannonball, they cartoonishly get flung into the ocean where the bloopers will decide their fate. So if we were to apply that logic to a random person being in this minigame, the worst that could happen is them just being carried by a blooper, which still sounds bad, but it could be a lot worse. Still, that can't really justify this minigame as being completely safe. You might be able to survive for a few seconds by staying on the island long enough before any cannons fire, but still, being in this minigame would be a terrible fate for pretty much anyone, so for that it goes in the lucky to survive tier. Next up is Box Mountain Mayhem. Does anyone even remember this minigame? I sure don't. Anyway, this minigame is pretty safe for the most part. All you really do is punch boxes and get coins from them. Sure, some of them fling you up in the air, but that force probably isn't going to be enough for you to die. In fact, it seems that you just land on the ground, no broken bones to be found. I didn't really intend for that to rhyme in the script, but whatever, we'll go with it. I guess you could also punch people in this game, but I mean, at least everyone isn't trying to use a gun to steal people's coins. This minigame gets to go on the couple of scratches tier. Next minigame is Bumper Balls, and this one is kinda hard to rank. For one, you have to know how to balance yourself on a ball like a circus clown, so that might already be challenging. And two, no one is shown to explicitly die in this game. Instead, the bloopers come back in this minigame and take someone away if they happen to fall into the water. These bloopers are going to appear quite a few times in this game, and it's ambiguous what happens to the player every single time. They could send you to a tropical paradise, or they could send you somewhere else. This minigame is kinda hard to rank based off of this ambiguity, but I assume that the bloopers aren't really up to any good. They probably work for Bowser for all I care. For that, I'm putting this minigame in the extreme caution needed tier. Next up is Buried Treasure. In this minigame, 4 players dig underground to find something. I wonder what it is they're trying to find. Anyway, this minigame seems fine enough. What's weird is that everyone isn't digging with shovels and are instead digging with their hands. These guys can even dig straight through rocks. What the heck are you made out of, Mario? Whatever, everyone seems fine in this minigame by the end anyway, which is pretty good. However, if you were to stop watching this video and suddenly get put into this minigame against your will, it would be kinda hard. Going underground for a long period of time can be very dangerous to the average person due to a plethora of reasons, and you might die of suffocation if you're not careful. Still, you're not too deep underground and it's as dangerous as I'm making it out to be, so for that, this minigame only gets to be in the risky tier. Next up on our list is Castaways. I'm gonna be honest, I don't even know what the heck is going on in this minigame. This minigame is called Castaways, which can imply that everyone is stuck on this island and that they don't have an easy way out, but instead of trying to search for food and shelter, everyone's trying to get money? What are you guys buying on this deserted island? There's no economy here. Is it just for bragging rights? Or the title of this minigame could just be a pun for casting a fishing rod, and I'm thinking too hard in this children's party game. Whatever. Everyone definitely survives in this minigame to the end, and I'm pretty sure they're not stranded on this island, because if they truly were, they probably would have started looking for food ages ago. There's not a lot of info with this game, but there doesn't seem to be any danger anywhere, so for that, I think this game gets the first ever survivable spot on the tier list. However, it's probably going to be on the lower end. Next up, sticking with the theme of easily survivable coin collecting minigames, we have Coin Block Blitz. This minigame just seems really tame, honestly. All you're doing is hitting a bunch of blocks with your fist. You can't even punch other people in this game, but you can jump on people's heads. Still, none of this is enough to be of any danger to you. In fact, this minigame actually looks kinda fun for the average person. This minigame goes on the very survivable tier for sure. Crazy Cutter is up next, the super satisfying minigame that appears in every Mario Party YouTuber's thumbnails for some reason. This isn't a call-out, I just want to know why this minigame specifically. Want to use Trace Race from Mario Party 4? Or like Double Vision from Mario Party DS? I don't freaking know. Anyway, this minigame can be a bit dangerous, but it's also kind of not. Everyone survives by the end of this minigame, which is a plus, but the situation isn't the safest thing in the world. I don't imagine that jackhammers are tools that are just given out to the average Joe on the street. I don't really know the ins and outs of how they work, I've never operated a jackhammer after all, but it does seem a bit risky. There's also the ending of the minigame. Not only do you unleash a creature that's been presumably fossilized for thousands of years onto the world, but you also create a giant hole, and from where you're standing, I wouldn't be surprised if the ground started crumbling under you. Still, no one in-game can actually get game ended, so I can't give this minigame a worse tier than the extreme caution tier, but I can't give it any better than that either. Next up on our list is Facelift. Man, kinda crazy I reviewed two of my favorite minigames back to back. Anyway, for this minigame, there's just not enough information to go off of here. As far as I can tell, no one even shows up to the minigame, and if they did show up, they all would just be pulling Bowser's face. Bowser is in this minigame, so you would assume that would mean something evil or nasty is happening in this minigame, but from what I can tell, nothing dangerous is happening at all. I know these hands are supposed to represent the characters, but you don't see their actual bodies at all during the minigame. I hate to do this, but there just isn't enough information to unpack with Facelift, and I think I have to create a separate tier for this minigame, the question mark tier. This tier is for minigames like this one where there isn't enough information to give it a reasonable spot on the tier list. I don't think this minigame is going to be the last minigame that gets a spot here, just warning you about that. Still a banger minigame though. Next minigame is Grab Bag, and this is another one of those ambiguous minigames where there isn't that much to go off of, but there's still enough information that I feel it deserves a spot on the ranking. In this minigame, everyone has a bag on their back, and the other players have to, well, grab them. Although the animations are questionable, nothing seems to be truly harmful in this game. The worst that can happen is that you'll get flattened or punched by accident. The one thing about this minigame I'm unsure about is the whole dungeon thing. The intro to this minigame suggests that everyone's doing this as punishment for something. Maybe as torture? Well, it doesn't seem that torturous in my opinion. It doesn't look all that painful either. Plus, I assume that they're going to be let out of the dungeon eventually. Or they're going to be playing Grab Bag for the rest of their lives, which, yeah, that kinda sucks, dude. Still, this minigame doesn't look that bad. A couple of questionable aspects, maybe, but it still gets to go on the couple of scratches tier. Next up is Hammer Drop, which might not seem that scary at first glance. But trust me, this minigame is no joke. Everyone is on a tower where a Hammer Bro constantly drops stuff on them. The Hammer Bro can drop coins, which is nice. Or they can drop hammers, which is awful. I don't think I need to spell out that hammers hit hard, and if you get directly hit by one of these hammers, then you might go unconscious at the very best. Sure, the hammers are simple to avoid, and if you get hit by a hammer after it hits the ground for the first time, it's not going to be that bad. Plus, everyone survives by the end of the minigame, as long as nobody falls off of the tower. If you're preoccupied with dodging hammers and collecting coin bags, you might lose focus and fall off of the tower. And if someone falls off of the tower, not only do they lose all their coins, but they're probably gonna lose a life too. As far as I'm concerned, falling off of the tower means death. There is water at the bottom of the tower, but water doesn't make the force of impact any less powerful. It might make the impact less impactful in the Mario-verse, but it's still a long fall. And any character who falls off of the tower doesn't come back to celebrate with the other players. Falling off of the tower is pretty rare, all things considered, but it still can happen, and you have to dodge all the hammers too, which is always a fun time. And by that I mean it's not a fun time. You gotta get lucky if you want to survive this minigame. It's on the lower end of the rankings, but it's still pretty bad. Things aren't gonna get any better with the next minigame, because our next minigame is Hot Babomb. I absolutely love Babombs. They're my favorite Mario enemy in the entire series, but I suspect that they won't love me back. Because they're freaking bombs. Bombs sure do explode a lot, huh? And in this minigame, you have to be lucky to not get blown up. Fortunately, the minigame ends only after one person blows up. So one person gets to have their guts splattered across the room instead of everybody. Though, to be fair, if a player in this game gets blown up, they seems to be fine at the end, so maybe bob-omps aren't as dangerous as they seem. I'm still not taking my chances though, so this minigame goes in the caution needed tier. Next up is Hot Rope Jump. Do you want to know what this classic playground activity was missing this whole time? Arson, that's what! I don't actually know how lethal fire actually is. I mean, if there's lots of it, then you're probably not making out of that area alive. But this minigame doesn't have too much fire, just enough to give you some serious burns. This minigame follows the same rules that the previous minigame has. If one person fails to jump the flames, then the minigame ends as everyone else gets to watch the person fail to put out their flames. This minigame is risky, that's for sure, but I don't think it's too bad. Fire is pretty painful, all things considered, but if you can at least survive being in a room filled with fire, then it's not that bad. This minigame goes in the risky tier. Next minigame on the list is Keep Away. In this minigame, you gotta work as a team to get the key to the lock at the end of the room, all having to dodge Spike Koopas. They never appear in any other Mario game except for this one, and only in this minigame. Why is that the case? I don't know, but this minigame looks pretty tame anyway, surprisingly. That's because the Spike Koopas don't really do anything. They don't throw punches, they don't throw hammers, they don't breathe fire, they just try to walk up to you and snatch the key. It's not like they even murder you after taking the key away, they just stand there wondering what to even do with it. And if you do make it to the end of the room with the key, you get a bunch of riches. The Koopas don't act jealous and try to gang up on you after you take their gold, they just kinda exists. Making the script for this video made me realize just how lame the Spike Koopas actually are. They're probably one of the least threatening enemies in the entire series. Other than those guys, this minigame doesn't seem that bad. It gets to go in the couple of scratches tier. Next up is Mario Bandstand, and at first glance, this minigame seems pretty tame. All you have to do is play music for an audience. Simple, right? Wrong. I don't know why, but Mario and his friends decided to perform in front of the worst audience in history. These audiences not only throw Koopa shells at the performers, which is sort of alright, but they throw frickin' hammers at the performers too. Who on earth let any of these people into the audience? Whoever's running the security in this place should get fired, because this is just extremely hazardous. Is everyone just so bad at playing music that the audience just decided to try to murder them in broad daylight? Of course, I am kind of overreacting. Mario and his friends just kind of shrug off the hammers like it's no big deal, and everyone does survive at the end of the minigame no matter what. This minigame is survivable, but it's still pretty risky for being such a seemingly innocent minigame while turning out to be not as innocent. It goes on the risky tier for that alone, though it is on the low end of the list. Next up is one of my favorite minigames, Mushroom Mix-Up. This minigame is kind of in the same boat as Bumper Balls, where it's just kind of unclear what happens when you get out of this minigame. Just like Bumper Balls, this minigame is complete with the bloopers that we've seen many times before, and with the bloopers, what happens off of the screen stays off of the screen. Or both of the models just get deloaded, but that's an anticlimactic answer. However, this minigame is a lot worse than Bumper Balls, and the sole reason for this is the toad that runs the whole operation. You see, in Bumper Balls, and even Bombs Away for that matter, you have a time limit for those minigames, meaning that if you stay alive for the duration of those minigames, then you can get off scot-free. But in Mushroom Mix-Up, there is no time limit. The minigame is survival-based, meaning that the minigame only ends when Toad sees that there's only one person remaining on the mushrooms, or if no one is remaining. You could try to beg this Toad to let you free from this hell, but he won't say anything. He'll just keep raising flags over and over again, making the mushrooms faster so that it guarantees that no matter how hard you try, someone will get out eventually, and he won't take no for an answer. This is Toad's world, and everyone is just living in it. Man, forget Bowser. This Toad is the true villain of Mario Party. Because of this minigame not having a time limit and only ending if one person, or no one, makes it to the end, that kind of bumps down the score for the minigame a little. This minigame is still in the extreme caution tier, but it's straddling the line for sure. Oh well, as bad as this minigame is, just think of how worse it could be. I mean, at least there's water in this minigame instead of, oh, I don't know, lava. But hey, at least this minigame doesn't have lava. Am I right? Following that minigame is another minigame about mushrooms, Musical Mushroom. This minigame follows the same rules as musical chairs, so whenever the music stops, you gotta dash up to the big mushroom to claim your prize. This minigame is quite tame, honestly. Sure, you could get punched in this minigame, and you could break your knee tripping over one of the oversized mushrooms, but it's still a minigame that looks like it could be easily survived. Only a couple of scratches will be given and taken during this minigame. Surely you won't go from a minigame as peaceful as this to an extremely deadly minigame again, right? Oh. Yeah, this minigame kinda blows. Alright, Platform Peril. This minigame might look just a teensy bit treacherous. But let's look at the positives first. You're in a whimsical sky area where you jump across magical platforms and there's some delightful music playing in the background. What's not to live for here? Well, a lot of things, actually. First of all, what, do I even have to spell it out for you? I can't think of many people who are acrobatic enough to jump across several platforms in the sky in a row without falling. And even then, there's other aspects of this minigame that sucks too. Not only do you have to make these jumps, but the platforms fall down a few seconds later too. So not only do you have to jump across platforms in the sky, but you also have to do it quickly. Couple that with some coins that tempt you for your greediness and random triangles that can block your jump, and you just have a really awful time. I don't think I need to spell it out for you. If you fall off of any of these platforms, you're done for. Just putting it out there, you know? And with all the circumstances you have to put up with here, it makes the name of this minigame a lot more clear. These sure are some perilous platforms. I guess it's not all bad though. The jumps don't look particularly difficult to make, and if you are put into this minigame, I'm guessing you don't have to deal with this isometric view. Plus, everyone can make it to the end of this minigame. Doesn't really make up for all the other crap you have to deal with, but hey, it can happen. Yeah, this minigame is deadly, and while I don't think there's enough for it to go to the highest tier of deadliness, since I could maybe see someone surviving this on their own, yeah, good luck on that, champ, you're sure gonna need it. Alright, if you thought the previous minigame was bad, then running of the bulb has got you covered. This minigame kind of just checks all the boxes. Giant ghost trying to slowly inch towards you to end your life? Check. Smaller ghosts trying to possess your mortal body into stealing the one source you have that's able to defeat all of them? Check. Giant stone blocks that can crush you? This minigame has it all. The only way you're going to be able to survive this is to walk across the hallway and put the light bulb you have on top of the generator, and then you're done. You have to work as a team in order to win this minigame, so I hope you have a team of people who are really good at ghost evaporating kung fu, because if not, then things aren't going to go well for you. Also, if any player touches the Big Boo, it's an instant game over for them, so if you're able to survive the possessions and the crushing, then you're probably not going to survive being sent into the void. I guess there are a couple of silver linings to this minigame. For one, you're on a team to win this minigame, so you at least have a squad to protect you from danger, and while the screen does slowly scroll across the room, that only applies to the players in-game, so there's nothing stopping you from making a mad dash to the generator to end things quickly. Still, there's a bunch of ghosts everywhere, and that just doesn't seem like a good time, now does it? For that, this minigame goes into the Lucky to Survive tier. By the way, this is the only game in the Mario series to my knowledge where boos can possess living people. Early N64 Mario game weirdness, or are boos actually not aware of the things they're capable of doing? You tell me, honestly. Next up is a minigame that everyone knows, Shy Guy Says. This minigame is iconic when it comes to both Mario Party itself and the debate that sparked the idea for this video. Do I have any sources to back this claim up? No. But I mean, come on, just look at what's happening here. This Captain Shy Guy is holding each of these 4 players hostage, and the only way to survive is to raise the correct flag that the Shy Guy is raising. I mean, how does anyone even get into this situation? You seriously can't tell me that this happens on an average Tuesday. Well, maybe it does for Mario, but whatever. This minigame suffers from the same rule that Mushroom Mix-Up had, which is the fact that this minigame is purely survival-based. This minigame doesn't end until only one person survives. This alone makes the minigame bad, but I feel like this situation feels a lot more dire than the other aquatic-based minigames. There's no bloopers to drag you away this time, but there is a Shy Guy pirate captain that decides your fate instead. I feel like since we're dealing with pirates here, there's a lot more brutality at play. The players can't even escape the barrels that they're trapped in. They'll try to escape, of course, but ultimately, they're stuck with wherever the waves take them. And even if they do arrive at land, they can't even get out of the barrels, so will probably starve to death or something. Also, what even happens to the person who wins this minigame? They're still stuck in the barrel, so do they just stay there? Maybe they get to be a part of the captain's crew? I don't know. Let's just assume that they survive somehow. There's also the fact that winning this minigame can be pretty difficult. Sometimes the captain will fake you out on which flag he'll raise, and from your perspective, you have to raise the flag on the opposite hand that he raises, so that's gonna be very confusing. Yeah, good luck trying to get through this minigame. At the very best, you're gonna be a part of a crew of pirates and win the minigames, and that's not even to say that you're gonna survive that long after the fact. This minigame barely just makes it into the if you're lucky tier, because I can at least kind of see how someone might survive this, but that's a really low chance. At least you're not being pelted by cannonballs in this minigame. Alright. So, the next minigame we have is Skateboard Scamper, and oh boy, have I been looking forward to talking about this minigame. This minigame was one of the reasons I even made this video in the first place, outside of other minigames like Shy Guy Says, and the reason for that is simple. This game is absolutely brutal. Alright, so first things first, the setting. You're skateboarding on top of a crumbling platform just barely floating above a massive pool of lava. Now, I'm no scientist, but I know that just being near lava is enough to off someone. Lava has such a high temperature that humans, or anything else for that matter, can only get within a certain range of it before burning up entirely, which is obviously the case in this minigame. So, we already have a bad start. and we haven't even gone into the actual minigame yet. Let's just say that despite all odds, you're able to survive being near lava. You just picked up some fireproof armor from Goron City or something. If you made it this far, and there's so much other stuff to deal with, you have to skateboard across a narrow platform with thwomps that get in your way, and you have to do it quickly too, because the platform you're skateboarding on will crumble underneath you, so you can't even waste any time or trip up, because if you do, all of your efforts to stay alive is in vain. Even if you do win the minigame, where the heck are you even supposed to go after? Are you supposed to jump in the lava? Probably, because there's no other freaking options. This minigame is just absurd on so many levels, and I never wish this minigame to be played even for my worst enemies. This minigame easily makes its way into the you die immediately tier, the very first minigame to do so, and to be honest, I don't think this minigame will be beaten in terms of deadliness anytime soon. Phew, that minigame was a doozy. Let's get back to some more lighthearted minigames, huh? Next up is Slot Car Derby, and I don't really think this minigame qualifies as lighthearted, or maybe it does. I don't actually know if the actual players are racing, or if they're just toy versions of those players. Slot cars are toys after all, so that second fact wouldn't be outside of the realm of possibility, but you can never know for sure. Even if the players are real, I don't think this minigame is too bad. Rather than flying off the track, you just spin out if you go too fast, and the only way you can truly lose this minigame is if someone else rams into your car, which is pretty unlikely to happen. Unless you suck. Either way, I don't think there's enough information here to make me truly confident about this minigame. I just want to know if the racers are alive, darn it. I guess it can go into the question mark tier, but if the players are real, then this minigame will probably go in the caution needed tier. It's really your call. Or mine, because, you know, I'm the one doing the ranking. Next minigame is Tipsy Tourney, and this minigame is also kinda weird. In order to win this minigame, you have to make the Koopa shell go over every tile, simple as that. The problem is that you're on a very tiny platform while doing this, and the platform tips whenever you're standing, hence the name. It is actually impossible to die in this minigame in-game, since there's an invisible wall protecting you. But let's just assume that Mario and friends are excellent at keeping their balance. You probably aren't going to have that same benefit as Mario. It's impossible to truly tip this platform over on its side, but this platform is still really tiny, and that could be a problem. Also, how do you even get out of this predicament if you win? You don't die if you lose, but you also can't really get off of this platform. There isn't really enough information to make me truly confident in ranking this, but I guess I'd put it into the lucky to survive tier. Rounding out the 4-player minigames is Treasure Divers. In this minigame, you dive for treasure, which is a pretty simple premise. However, Mario decided to host this minigame in a really dangerous corner of the sea, so now you have a giant shark and 2 murder squids to worry about too. Diving for these treasures and going back up the shore is easier said than done when a giant shark is waiting for you every time you try to dive down to pick up a treasure. Listen, I know that sharks are kinda made out to be more dangerous than they actually are, but if you're kinda messing around in its territory, then you're just asking for all sorts of trouble. Also, our old friends the bloopers are back, but they don't try to kidnap you this time. Instead, they just mind their own business doing whatever. Touching them still hurts you though. I'd be fine with this minigame if it wasn't for all the sea creatures. It just kinda turns a fun event into a pretty dangerous one right away. And I haven't even mentioned the fact that you can drown in this game, because yep, you certainly can do that. Luckily, all that really happens if you do manage to drown is just to slowly rise back up to the surface until you're alive again, which might work for Mario, but it probably won't work for you. Just watch your air and watch out for the creatures. This minigame gets to be on the extreme caution tier. You could also just theoretically chill out at the top of the water if you think it's too dangerous, but come on, where's the fun in that? That's all the 4-player minigames down. Now that we got those out of the way, let's head on over to the 1v3s. These minigames are going to be a bit harder to rank than the 4-player ones, simply because there's 2 different outcomes that can happen depending on if you're a part of the 1 or if you're a part of the 3. For these minigames, I'm going to look at both sides, obviously, but I feel like there's going to be more weight to the 3 people rather than the 1, since I feel like you're probably going to have a better chance at being on the team of 3. I'll also take into account the scenario that's worse for a particular side as well, just so that everyone can join the pain. Without further ado, here's some more minigames. Starting out this category is the anti-fan favorite, Bash and Cash. Hot take, but this might just be one of my favorite minigames in this game. It's so downright unfair and rigged that it's a wonder how this minigame even made it into the final version at all, and I love it. This minigame might not be easy if you're trying to keep your coins, but is it easy to survive? I kinda don't know how powerful these hammers really are. They kinda look like toy hammers, so you'd expect them to not be that bad, but in Mario Party 2, these hammers are confirmed to have enough power to be able to squish someone flat, so it's really just up to interpretation. Even if these hammers really are deadly, it might not be too bad. The person in the Bowser suit probably has enough layers of costume on to not feel the pain that much, and they do survive at the end of the minigame. Plus, the team of 3 don't really have much to worry about. So yeah, all in all, as much as this minigame is about inflicting as much pain and suffering to one person as possible, it's kind of just that. This minigame goes in the couple of scratches tier. Next up is Bowl Over, and this is another weird one. We obviously know that the solo person is a real person and that they're trying to bowl over some pins with a Koopa shell. The thing I'm confused about is the team of 3. All of them take the role of being the bowling pins in this minigame, and I don't know what to think. It's kind of like a slot card derby situation where I can't really say for sure if they're bowling pins designed to have the character's face in them, or if the team of 3 are inside the bowling pins. Well, if it's the latter, then this minigame gets kind of deadly. If a person on the team of 3 gets bowled over, then they kind of just disappear. Forever. So as far as I'm concerned, the solo player murders the other players who are disguised as bowling pins because they spat in the solo player's lunch or something. Or the bowling pin players aren't actually real and they're just freaking remote-controlled bowling pins. Yeah, this minigame goes in the question mark tier, unless I get definitive proof on the bowling pins. This minigame is kind of unrankable as far as I'm concerned. Your father might die while playing Bowl Over, but it's unknown whether the same can be said about the players. Next minigame is a sequel to a minigame we've already looked at before. It's Coin Block Bash. Now, Coin Block Blitz was pretty good in terms of being survivable, but Coin Block Bash makes things a bit deadlier by introducing a hammer into the mix. This minigame basically functions the same way as the other minigame, but this time, one player has the hammer, and they can use it to knock away other players and squish them. However, the other 3 players can also attack the solo player to steal the hammer, and then they can cause chaos. This is a minigame where the rules I said for the 1v3 minigames don't really apply, because everyone is kind of in the same boat here. The hammer obviously makes this minigame survivability worse than Coin Block Blitz, but how worse is it actually? Well, the hammer doesn't really do too much damage. The hammer can knock away and squish players for a bit, but after a while, the players get back up. It's impossible to actually die in this minigame from the actual game's perspective, and I assume that if you were put into this minigame, while it would hurt a lot, you probably wouldn't die. The hammer still makes this minigame worse than Coin Block Blitz, but I still think you have a good enough shot. This minigame goes in the risky tier. Up next is Coin Shower Flower. It's another unbalanced minigame like Bash and Cash, but this time, the solo player gets to reap all the benefits while the other 3 get to sit and watch the solo player have fun. However, if I were a part of the 3, I would be thankful because there could have been a lot worse scenarios that I could have been a part of. Case in point, Coin Shower Flower is pretty survivable. The team of 3 are basically completely safe from danger because of their leaf boats, and while I could see how the solo player could be kind of in danger from falling off, even if they do fall off, it's not that big of a fall, and they just land in the water. I know that landing in water from a high place isn't as safe as video games would lead you to believe, but the flower isn't too high off of the ground that it seems relatively safe. And if you fall in the water, there's no bloopers that drag you away. You just get to swim back to dry land, since it's kinda just right there. All in all, pretty great showing from Coin Shower Flower. I'd go as far as to say that this minigame is survivable. Not many things to worry about if this minigame gets picked. Crane Game is next, and it's another one that I'm gonna put in question marks here. Yeah, let's face it, if I had a hard time determining the fate of the characters in Slot Card Derby and Bowl Over, then I literally have no idea what the fate of these guys are in this minigame. Of course, the solo player is fine. They just get to dangle around and pick up the other players, or they only get to do that one time before the game stops them. The 3 players take the role of the toys in this minigame, and I just don't even know. Are the toys alive? They seem to be alive since they wiggle around and stuff, but they're also toys. If they are alive, then they probably don't have much to worry about, honestly. The solo player is only going to pick... Why do I keep saying solar? Solo, damn it. Anyway, the solo player is only able to pick up one player, and if they fail to do so, then the minigame ends. If the solo player is able to capture one of the 3, things get even more confusing. What happens to a player if they enter this pipe? By regular Crane Game logic, they're probably gonna be fine, but what if the pipe leads to their untimely doom? Even then, I still wouldn't worry about it, since Crane Games are mostly rigged anyway. Plus, the solo player could always just ignore them and get coins instead. That was a lot of information for a minigame that I didn't even rank. If I did have to rank it, then it would probably get on the couple of scratches tier. But again, I can't come up with an entirely reasonable conclusion for this minigame, so question mark tier it is. Next up is Paddle Battle, and this minigame is a lot easier to rank compared to some of the other 1v3s. For starters, everyone in this minigame is natural person rather than inanimate objects. Secondly, this is another minigame where it doesn't really matter if you're a part of the team of 3 or the solo player, because the same thing basically happens for both sides. The goal of this minigame is to paddle a boat to the end of a river, which sounds simple enough. The problem is that this river is in Spirit Guide territory, which means that if a player gets too close to the edge of their side of the river, then they're gonna get poked. Spears might be a pretty old weapon of choice, but all things considered, it's still a dangerous weapon at that. If spears were used to impale fish, then it's safe to assume that a human body wouldn't fare too well against a spear either. Luckily, these Spirit Guides are merciful, because all they do is poke you a bit, which does cause you to lose money. The force of the spears doesn't seem to be enough to poke a hole through you, so while it's obviously still dangerous, the Spirit Guides probably agreed to the situation beforehand, otherwise things would get a lot uglier. I gotta be honest though, this minigame looks really unfair for the one. I mean, the team of 3 gets to have the side of the boat to themselves, but the solo player doesn't even get to have a more powerful paddle, so they just have a severe disadvantage. Well, I guess the game does do some balancing stuff to make sure that the one player has a chance, but still, if you were the solo player in real life, you would be screwed. Basically, this minigame still looks pretty painful, but it's not too bad. Still, those spears could be really dangerous, so I'll put this minigame on the lower end of the caution needed tier. However, I did kind of miss out on one detail. You see, this minigame looks bad for the players in the game, but did you know this is also one of the few minigames in the series that can be dangerous to you in real life? I don't even need to explain why. Most of you already know. Next up is Pipe Maze, and I gotta be honest, I'm gonna keep this section short. This might just be one of the most survivable minigames in Mario Party. All you do is, well, nothing. You wait for the solo player to pick a pipe, and that's it. No tricks, no strings attached, whoever gets the treasure chest wins. And nothing bad ever happens to the rest of the players, you just get to walk away without any harm. The one argument I could see being made here is that this minigame takes place underground, and that could be kind of a hard spot to get out of. But I mean, come on. Mario and his friends travel underground on the daily. If anything, this is one of the least likely locations for you to get harmed in at the Mushroom Kingdom. I don't even think you could die in this minigame if you tried. That's how safe it is. Easily the most survivable minigame in Mario Party thus far. Speaking of pipes, what's the main thing that usually comes out of pipes in the Mario series? Piranha plants. And that segues into our next minigame, Piranha's Pursuit. Now, everyone knows that this minigame is basically impossible to win as the team of 3, but if we're talking about survivability, they have it a lot better. I mean, they just get to stand on top of a cloud and try to assist the Piranha plant in murdering the solo player. The solo player has it rough in this minigame, constantly having to jump over rocks and falling logs, all while trying to avoid the Piranha plant. This situation looks awful for the solo player, but it's actually not as bad as you think. You see, whenever the solo player does get caught in this game, which is a rare sight all things considered, all that happens is that the Piranha plant grabs them, shakes the money out of them, and then just spits them right back onto the ground. Yeah, it's kinda mean, but it's a whole lot better than the alternative. What happens after the minigame is over is kinda left up to debate, but I'd assume the Piranha plant had its fill after the solo player gets caught. And even if the Piranha plant was more of a threat, what's stopping the solo player from just getting off of the skateboard and just booking it? The Piranha plant doesn't really move that fast, and doesn't really get faster after the team of 3 waters it for a while. So yeah, I'd say that this minigame is pretty survivable, actually. Now, if we're talking about the top 100 and Superstars version of this minigame where PD Piranha knocks a solo player into the sky, then this minigame would be pretty bad. But luckily, this is a Mario Party 1 ranking, so those versions don't count. Overall, I'd say this minigame gets to go in the a bit risky tier. This minigame looks pretty threatening, but ironically, the Piranha plant is a lot more bark than bite. Plus, if you're on the team of 3, then you've basically nothing to worry about. Now, Tightrope Treachery on the other hand, this minigame is where the fun truly happens. I'll admit, this minigame is a lot more bad for the 1 player than it is for the 3, and that kind of affects the rankings a bit, but come on. Just look at this. In other minigames in the 1v3 category, either the team of 3 are at least kind of relatively safe from danger and the 1 player doesn't have it too bad, or their punishment is pretty much just as bad as the 1 player. Or Bowl Over and Crane Game can exist, but I'm not counting those. This minigame is the one exception to that rule. You'd better hope to God that you're a part of the team of 3, because if you're not, well, I'll prepare your funeral for next Tuesday. If I can even recover your body, that is. The 1 player constantly has to deal with the cannonballs that the team of 3 shoot at them. Need I remind you, one of those is enough to knock out your lights, so how do you think a couple thousand more of them would feel? Awful, that's what. I guess if Mario Party logic is to be concerned, the cannonballs will only knock you out for a second, but I feel like all of that damage would add up eventually. The solo player has to deal with all of this, plus the fact that they have to balance themselves on a rope, and with the wind constantly moving the rope too. And if the 3 players knock down the solo player into the water, they get dragged off by a blooper, though I feel like in this instance the solo player might already be dead by the time the blooper comes to pick them up. The team of 3 have the much better outcome of the deal, but they shouldn't get too trigger happy with the cannonballs, because it's entirely possible that the team of 3 can hit each other, and I don't think that the wind and the cannonballs are going to make staying on their tiny-ass boats any easier. Basically, tightrope treachery is an awful time regardless of what side you're on, and while the team of 3 have the better end of the deal, which factors into the game's survivability a little bit, that isn't enough to save this minigame from being in the lucky to survive tier. You'd think that things would get better from the last minigame, but actually, that's not the case at all. In fact, things get worse. Introducing our final 1v3 minigame of the bunch, Tug of War, an infamous minigame for being another minigame that can deal a significant amount of damage to you in real life. But believe me, a couple of blisters on your palm will be the least of your concerns in this minigame. Even the location of this minigame sucks, because we all know that hosting a minigame in a giant death cannon is just such a good idea. How are you even going to survive if you win this minigame? Well, first of all, you need to get to that point in the first place, which is easier said than done. Remember how in the last minigame I said it was better to be on the team of 3? Yeah, not this time. It's a classic tug-of-war match, but instead of taking place inside of your school gymnasium, it takes place near a giant overgrown piranha plant from the depths of hell itself. And if you aren't strong enough to overpower the opposing side, you get eaten by the beast. And the only way that you would ever be remembered is through the coins that you once had before the incident. Hopefully you feel a lot better knowing that your well-earned coins are going to be spent on stars and inflatable Bowser tubes after you die. The team of 3 are kind of at a disadvantage here, but I'd argue it's just as bad for the solo player. 3 players seem to be enough to overpower the strength that the Bowser suit is capable of, so everyone is truly at a disadvantage here. Still, I think that the team of 3 has it worse, because if just one of your teammates isn't pulling their weight, then consider yourself plant food for the rest of your non-life. Again, even doing the impossible task of winning this minigame probably isn't going to be enough to escape. No matter what, one side is going to go out, and while it is possible to draw, it's a very low chance that it's going to happen. And if you win, you get to do the task of having to traverse through this perilous canyon with no signs of life to help you anywhere. If tightrope treachery got a lucky to survive tier, then I think it's safe to say that this minigame probably deserves to be on the you die immediately tier. It's kind of stretching the line a bit, but I'd still argue that this minigame is no joke. That was quite the interesting selection of minigames, huh? A couple of really good minigames and a couple of really bad ones. We're done with the 1v3 minigames, and we're also done with my arbitrary ranking system for the 1v3 minigames, because we're on to the 2v2 minigames. There's only 5 of them. Yeah, I don't know why there's only 5 2v2 minigames either. Mario Party 2 and 3 has more item minigames and this game has 2v2s. Anyway, it's going to be a lot more simple to rank 2v2s, since both sides are essentially doing the same thing. I guess one part of the team has to do different things than the other part in some minigames, but those are few and far between. Time to quickly go over these minigames. First 2v2 minigame on the list is Bobsled Run, and I'm gonna keep it real with you. All of these minigames kinda suck. I mean, gameplay-wise, most of these minigames are pretty fun, but when you have to take into account the survivability of these minigames, things start to fall apart. The other categories at least have some minigames that are very survivable, but this category, not so much. Let's stop beating around the bush and actually talk about the minigame. This minigame's concept is simple. You and a teammate have to pilot a bobsled, which sounds simple enough. You know, except for all the bottomless pits that are everywhere. There are a lot of sections of the course that also have boost pads, and while they do speed up the bobsled, it also makes the bobsled harder to control, which makes it more likely to fall down. Now, it is definitely possible that the two teams can make it to the end of the course, and maybe you're just really good at riding bobsleds, so this minigame isn't that much of a challenge for you. But still, I doubt that most people have the coordination and skills to make it out of the course alive, so I'm putting this minigame on a high extreme caution tier. Next minigame is Bombsketball, and I'm pretty sure the minigame speaks for itself. Ever played a game of basketball and thought, hey, you know what this game needs more of? Explosions. Well, I never thought that because I don't really play basketball that much. However, I still get the sinking feeling that bombs and basketball wouldn't mesh well. Unfortunately, Mario and friends think otherwise. This minigame is actually pretty fun, but it won't be so fun when the ball blows up in your face, ruining the game and your life. This minigame gets some point stock for having an explosive replacing an actual ball, but in all honesty, if we're going by the game's rules, it gets a bit better. The bomb doesn't seem to explode until after you get it into the net. That doesn't really help if you're trying to do a slam dunk, but if you keep your distance, then this minigame becomes a lot more survivable. Still, you're playing basketball with the bomb, and the bomb could probably still explode anyway if you throw it a bit too hard. The bomb does have a mind of its own after all. This minigame goes into the extreme caution tier. Next minigame is Deep Sea Divers. The goal of this minigame is to get treasure chests, and that requires you to dive deep into the ocean. I'm not really an expert in this field, but I feel like diving really deep underwater is a big risk. Not only does it take a long time for you to resurface, meaning that drowning is really easy, but there's also the fact that the lower you go into the water, the higher the pressure is, so there's only a couple of meters, or feet if you're a filthy Imperial system user, before your body just explodes from the pressure. I don't think that the sea is that deep enough that it's really a problem, but the drowning issue certainly is. Of course, you could just get the treasure chest near the surface of the water, which is a lot safer than going for the ones at the bottom, or better yet, you don't even have to play at all, which is the coward's way out, of course. And if you're the person on the boat, you don't even have to worry about anything, since you don't even have to go in the water. Overall, I feel like this minigame should go in the risky tier. It's deadly if you want to get the treasure chests at the bottom, but theoretically, you could just get the chest near the surface of the water instead, which is the smart thing to do if you want to stay alive. It's a boring answer, but it works. Next up is Desert Dash, and this minigame is pretty self-explanatory. It's that centipede teamwork game I had to play in school to learn the value of teamwork, but instead of taking place in a school gymnasium, it takes place in the searing hot desert in the middle of nowhere. Gosh, what is it with the Mario Party taking simple teamwork games and putting them in much more dangerous locations? Still, the premise is simple. Go from the start of the desert to the end of the desert while working as a team, and it would be easy, except for the fact that there's a giant stone that can crush you to death. Oh, for frick's sake. This minigame was going so well, and they just had to put a thwomp here. I guess you could just stay still for the entire minigame, and if cartoon logic were to apply, then getting switched by the thwomp wouldn't be that bad. But still, if you want to win the minigame, you gotta risk your own life just to be able to do it. Also, the desert kinda sucks, let's not forget about that. An extreme caution tier for this minigame. Next up is Handcar Havoc. Just look at this minigame. Look at this minigame and tell me where you think this is gonna rank. Now, it is true that everyone can get to the end of this minigame alive, but everyone can get to the end of Skateboard Scamper, and look where that minigame ended up. I don't know how easy it is to operate a handcar, nor do I know how safe it is to operate one, but if I had to give my personal handcar review to this particular minigame, it would be this. Because I wouldn't be alive to review it. You and a partner have to operate an unwieldy handcar over lava. Yep, sure is a giant boiling pool of lava below you during this entire minigame. And while the handcar does come with brakes and stuff, the railroad is so freaking wobbly and twisty that you and your partner have to lean in the right direction in order for the handcar to stay on the track. And yep, you can fall off of this track, because of course you can. You have to be incredibly precise to operate this thing. You have to go to a school for 10 years in handcar operation, with an official handcar degree and diploma, and an additional 50 more years being able to successfully operate the most rickety handcars known to man, and even then that probably won't be enough. If Skateboard Scamper was in the lowest tier imaginable, then this minigame can rightfully join it in the you die immediately tier. Good luck ever making it past the first turn without going into the lava. And those are all the 5 2v2 minigames. Needless to say, you'd better hope that there are no 2v2 minigames that show up, or else you're pretty much screwed. The best option for survival is deep sea divers, and even then, that's a bit of a stretch. Yeah, 2v2 minigames are kind of a curse in this game, but will the one-player minigames fare any better for your safety? This is the only Mario Party that has them, so these minigames better get some good rankings to make their one and only appearance count. First up for the one-player minigames is... Ghost Guess. Looks like we're off to a flying start, aren't we? So, you're in a dimly lit cave while 8 ghosts circle around you, slowly inching closer to you every second. The only way to survive in this minigame is to pick the boo that moves later than all the other boos. If you pick wrong or wait too long, well, it's not entirely clear if you die here, but I'm sure anyone can connect the dots. This minigame looks easy from an outside perspective, but think of what's going to happen if you were put into this situation. You can't look at all 8 of the boos at the same time, and couple that with the pressure that you're going to feel when playing this minigame, and it's a recipe for disaster. If it's any consolation, if you do pick the correct boo, all of the boos disappear, and you even get 10 coins for your efforts. Still, there's probably a lot safer options to make money, and there's also the question of how you're even going to get out of the spooky cave to begin with. This minigame feels more like a torture simulator than an actual fun party game, and while you probably won't die immediately, you'd have to be really lucky to stay alive here. It's a 1 in 8 chance of winning. Hopefully you don't lose. Your soul, that is. Next up is a minigame that probably has the exact opposite energy to the last one, Ground Pound. Instead of being in a spooky cave, you're in a peaceful looking forest. Instead of deadly ghosts, there are butterflies that won't do you any harm. Also, remember when I said that Ghost Guess looked easy from a player's perspective, but looked difficult from the character's perspective? Well, in this minigame, it looks easy from the player's perspective, and it looks even easier from the character's perspective. There's a lot of perspectives in these minigames, as you could probably tell. Seriously though, this minigame is easy enough when you're playing it, but for the character's POV, it's way more obvious which pegs have spikes on them or not. Of course, there's the question of being able to ground pound in the first place, or hip drop as this game calls it for some reason. But what's even the punishment if you fail? Disappointment? You're gonna be fine regardless if you win or not. Of course, if you ground pound the wrong pegs, it's obviously gonna hurt a lot, but come on. You have to be trying in order to do that. This minigame has the potential to be slightly dangerous because of the spiked pegs, but anyone stupid enough to hit them probably won't even know how to ground pound in the first place. I think it's fair that this minigame gets to go in the very survivable tier. Next is Knock Block Tower. The setting of this minigame kinda makes this one battle ready, but the giant tower in the middle of the sky is just the beginning. You have to knock down all wooden crates and reach the treasure chest at the end. The only problem is that there are a bunch of thwomps guarding the treasure too, and if you hit them by mistake, you're getting knocked off of the tower to fall to your early demise. I don't even think that anyone could jump high enough to break all the boxes, let alone get to the treasure chest at the end, so you might as well wait out the timer. If you do wait out the timer, then a fly guy will come in and take the treasure chest, leaving you with nothing. What sucks about this is that the fly guy doesn't even have the courtesy to take you away from the tower as well, meaning that you're basically stuck here for the rest of your life. You might be able to climb down, but that's a big maybe, and the failure of messing up if you do participate in this minigame doesn't help the game's case much either. This minigame goes into the lucky to survive tier. Limbo Dance is up next, and honestly, this minigame doesn't look that bad. No life-threatening acts of danger here, just some good old-fashioned limbo. I guess the jungle you're in could be problematic, but if any wild creatures try to ambush you, you at least have some toads to protect you. And even then, this jungle is probably free from danger anyway. Believe me, I wouldn't put it past Toad to turn this jungle into a death trap, but I don't think those are the vibes this minigame is trying to create. The only real threat here is getting a spine injury, but you're kinda doing it to yourself if you want to play Limbo. Overall, this minigame gets to go in the very survivable tier. Next minigame is Memory Match, and just like Ground Pound, this minigame takes place in a safe-looking forest. And also just like Ground Pound, this minigame looks pretty easy to survive. The worst outcome I can see happening to someone is the Bowser panel, which makes you dizzy if you ground pound it, but the player in-game seems to recover from it quickly. Outside of the Bowser panel, this minigame looks even better than Ground Pound, since there's no spike pegs that will hurt you if you mess up. Plus, you get to enjoy the music that plays in this minigame, and only this minigame. If I have to be honest, this minigame can compete with being the most survivable minigame in Mario Party, right next to Pipe Maze. I just don't see any reason why you would be able to feel any pain whatsoever when playing it. Unless you're doing it on purpose, of course. Top marks all around. If you see this minigame get picked, you can breathe a sigh of relief, because you basically just have a free win without any danger whatsoever. While I wish we could keep this good streak going, the next minigame is Pedal Power. Similar to Ghost Guess, this is another minigame where you're abandoned in a spooky environment and have to survive a ghost. For some reason, you have to stay on this bicycle mechanism thing. Whatever, you gotta pedal enough power to the light bulb in order to make the boo disappear. I think that this scenario is kind of funny. Other minigames at least try to hide the fact that they lead to your doom, and then there's this minigame which holds no punches at trying to tell you that you're in the Mario equivalent to a jigsaw trap. Also, this kinda seems unnecessary. Like, why not try to run away from the ghost that's slowly encroaching on you? It doesn't seem like the ghost is moving that fast, so you probably have a lot of time to escape. Losing this minigame is also kind of dialed back from what happens in Ghost Guess. If you lose in this minigame, you get absorbed by the boo, which is still pretty bad, but hey, at least you don't die immediately. It'll just be a much slower process. Okay, on second thought, maybe that is worse. Yeah, this minigame is pretty bad, and if it weren't for the whole ignoring the challenge rule that I made up, this minigame would get a better score. Still though, it doesn't look too bad, unless your legs are tired or something. This minigame goes into the extreme caution tier. Next minigame is Shell Game, one of the most creatively named minigames in the entire series. This minigame has the same problem that Knock Block Tower and Hammer Drop does, in that it takes place on top of a giant tower in the middle of nowhere. This minigame at least looks better than the other two though. You don't have to dodge hammers with other people, and you can't get bumped off of the tower. Instead, you have to find the Koopa Troopa with the right chest, similar to those classic ball under the cup games. You do get dizzy after the shuffling, but you do seem to get over it quickly. There's also the fact that if you lose this minigame, all that happens is that you don't get the coins from the chest. And hey, at least you lose the coins and not your life, so is it really worth complaining about? Yes. Still, no matter if you win or lose the minigame, that still begs the question of how you get off of the tower at all. Maybe the Koopas can assist you in getting down, because they also seem like they're stuck up here. This minigame is not as bad as Hammer Drop or Knock Block Tower, but I still need to put this minigame in the extreme caution tier for the peerless setting alone. From one uncreatively named minigame to another, we have Slot Machine, and this minigame is simple. All that happens is you get to play some slots, and you don't even get harmed if you fail. The only concerning bit is the opening, where you seem to fall from a pretty great height to land on the lever to start the machine. But maybe the mushroom on the lever is soft. I don't know, not much information given for me to truly call this minigame's bluff. The characters in-game don't seem to suffer in this minigame, so that's most likely going to be the case with you as well. The opening is a bit questionable, but otherwise, this minigame looks very survivable. Just watch the landing at the beginning. Next up is Teetering Towers. The goal of this minigame is to get from the starting platform to the ending platform, but the problem is that there's a bunch of towers that tip over and crumble if you stand on them for too long. You gotta jump from tower to tower to win this minigame, and if you fail, you get to plunge into the dark abyss of nothingness. How neat! Yeah, this minigame looks pretty much impossible to survive. Even if you're the best jumper in the entire world, it looks like it would be really difficult to jump across the towers due to the changing slopes that you have to deal with. And even if you got to the end of the minigame, how are you gonna escape from the ending platform? No one's even around to help you. The best option for this minigame looks to be staying at the starting platform and not jumping at all. But unfortunately, that probably isn't an option. You see, in other minigames where you have the option of not doing anything, there's a time limit that will most likely take you out of the minigame once it reaches 0. But in this minigame, there is no timer. It's actually kind of hard to tell if you can just stay at the beginning since the player automatically jumps to the starting tower in-game, so I'm just going to have to assume that you're forced to do this minigame. Well, if that's the case, then I'm fairly certain that nobody would be able to survive this. You'd have to be one of the best jumping technicians in the world to have a chance at this minigame, and even then, it still looks really difficult. Some of you might argue with this, but I'm putting this minigame in the you die immediately tier. I just don't see any survivable outcome for this minigame. It's on the lower end of the tier, but that's not really saying much considering that there's only 4 entries. Next minigame is Whack-A-Plant. If you've played Mario Party before, you know just how overpowered this minigame is. You can easily get 30 plus coins in this minigame without even trying. But is this OP minigame good to play in real life? Well, for starters, you constantly have to deal with all of the man-eating plants that surround you at every corner. The player in-game doesn't seem to have much trouble dealing with them, but as much confidence I have in you, I don't think you'll be able to ward off a bunch of plants coming out of warp pipes. That being said, the plants don't really do anything, so maybe they'll just leave you alone if you happen to play this minigame, and they seem easy enough to get rid of too. Piranha plants typically can't get jumped on in most Mario games, but these ones can get jumped on pretty easily, and they even give you money for it, so maybe this minigame isn't as bad as I originally thought. I still think that it's pretty risky dealing with all these dangerous plants, but they don't seem to pose that much of a threat to the player in-game. I'm still putting this in the extreme caution tier, but just know that it's on the lower end. Man, piranha plants kinda suck in this game. Alright, we're finally here. The last minigame to talk about, the Bumper Ball Maze. This is considered a special minigame, but I've decided to group it with the rest of the one players here because, I mean, you are playing as one person in the game, right? It counts. This minigame obviously falls under the same camp as the original Bumper Balls. You don't have to deal with the other players, but you do have to deal with being on a narrow path for the whole minigame, which is kind of a risky play. If you fail this minigame, our good old anti-friend the Blooper will come and scoop you up. And yet again, it's not obvious what the intent of the bloopers are in this game. So I'm in the editing phase of the video. I'm literally almost done editing. And it turns out the bloopers are not actually in the minigame. I guess I should have done more research, I guess. Also, the reverb is not in effect. It's just my mic didn't have the setting on when I last used it. Oh well! Yeah, this minigame is just a different version of Bumper Balls if it wasn't obvious to you already, which, I mean, why would it not be? So because of that, I'm putting this minigame in the extreme caution tier with its 4-player brother. And that's it! We're finally done. That's every single minigame in Mario Party ranked by how survivable they are. Now you know which minigames are safe to play at home, and which minigames you're never going to come back from. Well, not really. Again, this video idea was purely for fun, so there's probably a couple of points I made that don't really add up that much. Still, this is a pretty fun list to make, as it got me to talk about the minigames in Mario Party in a way that I hadn't really thought about before. Mario Party is a really fun game, and it's a franchise that I really love, much like many other Mario franchises. Some of the minigames might be painful to play in real life, but remember, just think about how much better you have it at home than what Mario and Co. constantly have to deal with. Playing tug-of-war might be painful, but man, it looks so much worse in-game. Thanks for watching this video to the end, I really appreciate it. I spent a lot of time working on this video because Lord knows trying to apply real-life logic into a cartoon video game takes a lot of effort. If you liked this video, make sure to let me know that you liked it by leaving a like. Comment on how much of an idiot I was in this video for not explaining so-and-so, and be sure to subscribe. I won't promise I will be making a ton of videos, but it would still be really appreciated. And who knows, if this video gets enough attention, I could take a look at the mini sequels that this game has and talk about those games too. I could also make other Mario related stuff, since I really like Mario, as evident by this video. And if you want more real-life logic applied to Mario, I also have the other Mario Party survivability tier list in the description. I haven't watched any of them, but I bet they have different opinions than me when it comes to this field, so I recommend checking them out. Alright, that's enough shilling for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you around. Take care.